Hi, my name is Demetria Thompson. I'm a student with Liberty University Online. I'm studying for my Master's in Human Services, and this is my final project for the Interpersonal Communications course, HSCO 508. The title of this project is called Enlarging the Conversation. This class has provided me with some great insight of self and how my identity is constantly being constructed, as well as how I might be perceived when interacting with others. But more than anything, this class has provided me with some great life skills. Over the next few minutes, I'd like to share with you some of the skills and techniques that I've gained during this 8-week period, as well as how I plan to implement them when communicating and connecting with others. Through online assessments, reading assignments, class discussions, as well as feedback and insight from my instructor, I've charted the course that will help me develop better communication skills. But I had some great resources to help me along the way. Let me share those with you first. Listening, The Forgotten Skill, a self-teaching guide by Burley Allen. How to Solve the People Puzzle, Understanding Personality Patterns by Carbonell. Why Don't We Listen Better? Communicating and Connecting with Others by Peterson. Bridges, Not Walls, a book about interpersonal communication by Stewart. And as well, we viewed the movie Fireproof. Here we discussed barriers that hindered effective communication. Let's go ahead and get started. First slide, please. My overarching goal and takeaway from this class is to be a level 1 listener, to make meaningful connections with others where they feel valued, they feel respected, and they feel listened to. And to listen from a non-judgmental and empathetic way, creating a safe environment where people feel safe to share. Next slide, please. What is communication? Well, according to Stewart, communication is a collaborative process. No one person can completely control the communication event. No technique, no set of communication move can definitely determine the outcome. Communication is a continuous, complex, collaborative process of verbal and nonverbal meaning making. Next slide, please. Inhaling and exhaling. We all do it, right? Well, communication is also like inhaling and exhaling. Stewart used this metaphor to describe how when we're breathing in others as they're sharing, we're listening and perceiving what they have to say. And through exhaling, we're sending out of ourselves through sharing. Next slide, please. Enlarging the conversation. Well, that's what we're here to do, right? When enlarging the conversation, the goal is to understand our strengths, our weaknesses, and to implement effective communication skills and avoid those barriers that will hinder our ability to listen and to talk when communicating. Next slide. Interpersonal communications. Well, according to Stewart, interpersonal communication refers to the kind of communication that happens when people involved talk and listen in ways that maximize the presence of the personal. You want to maximize your moment that you're spending with that person that you're sharing or that you're listening to. Next slide, please. Uniquely you. Uniquely You refers to an online assessment that the entire class did the first week. This online assessment identified personality types as well as behavior blends. It referred to the DISC model, and it identified different personality types which will show strengths, weaknesses, and things that hinder and things that improve communication. So this is where I get to share a little bit more personal details about myself. My Uniquely You assessment describes me as being stable but shy, preferring to work in the background, behind the scenes. I'm considered loyal and friendly. I'm more comfortable on an individual basis. However, I'm often sought after as a good listener. This could be because I'm not a confrontational person. I prefer relating more on a personal level. However, this also did reveal to me that I tend to be more reserved in public. This is true. However, I do understand that this could also be perceived by others as me not being approachable, maybe me being a little stuffy, me being a little stoic. In the past, I thought that I was a good listener. I thought that I applied empathetic listening, active listening skills. But what this assessment helped me to identify were there are some barriers that hinder my ability to listen, and I'm pretty sure that came from me growing up. Not an only child, but I had 3 brothers, and I spent a lot of times by myself, and just kind of grew up shy, somewhat of introvert. So I do understand and I identify, and I definitely agree with that assessment of me, that I do tend to be shy, a little reserved, and not very easily sharing of myself. I guess I have to build a trust before I do that. But self-awareness is key. Self-awareness will allow me to be more attentive to this and intentional about not being reserved, because I do want to be able to be effective, and to be effective I need to be approachable. So that's a little bit about me. Let's move on to the next slide. 3 levels of listening. Burley Allen identified 3 levels of listening in her book. The first level of listening is empathetic listening. When we apply empathetic listening, we're being aware, we're present in the conversation, we're responding, and we're being mindful of potential barriers, potential distractions that can hinder our ability to listen effectively. Basically, empathetic listening comes from here. It comes from the heart. It shows compassion. It shows that you're engaged and that you care about what's being shared, and you care about the person that's sharing. Listening, level 2 listening. This is hearing words. Basically, you're listening but not really listening. You're emotionally detached from the conversation, which leads to miscommunication. Level 3 listening. This is called listening in spurts. You're tuning in, you're tuning out of the conversation. You're listening without responding. You're faking attention. You're forming a rebuttal and even making judgments. So you definitely want to be mindful of level 2 and level 3 listening. This can hinder your ability to communicate and listen effectively. Next slide, please. Potential barriers to communicating effectively. Also, noise pollution. You want to be very careful when you enter into these different areas. I'll just address a few. There are several barriers that can hinder your ability to communicate effectively. We're all effective differently, but again, let's just share a few. Biased listening. Biased listening happens when you label the information ahead of time. You distort the information either positively or negatively, and you're hearing only what you want to hear. Basically, level 3 listening again. So you want to be mindful of biased listening. Nonverbal clues. Nonverbal clues can send a message to the person that's sharing with you that maybe you don't care about what they're sharing, you're not engaged, you don't agree. Nonverbal clues that can send this message sometimes can come in the event of a raised eyebrow, or maybe folded arms, or not making eye contact. So you want to be very aware and very mindful of those nonverbal clues. Another barrier to effective communication would be being defensive. Being defensive perpetuates non-listening. It creates an argumentative atmosphere, and it hinders problem solving. So definitely be aware of being defensive, excuse me. Emotional listeners. Emotional listeners was addressed by Peterson in his book. Emotional listeners tend to be effective more by how they receive the information, how it made them feel, other than the content of the information. An example would be hot button issues. If you're a person that listens from your stomach, from your heart, or from your head, those are some functions that can hinder your ability to receive the information. Say, for instance, you're a person that listens from your heart. Maybe you're hurt by the information, so you're more concerned about how the information made you feel other than the content of the information. Personally, I've done all three. I do all three. It just depends on the situation. So you want to just be mindful of how are you receiving it in a way where you're offended by it, you're affected by it, or are you listening for the content of the information for that to be more effective. So you want to be aware of being an emotional listener and how you're perceiving the information. Planning rebuttals. You're listening from the head here. Flat brain syndrome. Flat brain syndrome is also something that Peterson addressed. It blocks effective thinking, effective hearing, and seeing accurately. Basically, flat brain syndrome is a mix of emotion. You can get in emotional overload. You're stuffed. You're full. You're so emotional you can't hear the information the way it is intended to come out. So you want to be aware of these barriers. Again, there are more barriers that hinder effective communication, but these were just a few that I wanted to share with you. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Improving interpersonal communication. Here we have a solution for those barriers that hinder our ability to listen effectively. So first, we can listen at a level 1. Level 1 listening demonstrates that you're actively engaged, that you're interested in what the talker is sharing. Nonverbal clues. You want to use some positive nonverbal clues. Something as simple as leaning forward, showing that you're engaged, that you're listening, nodding your head. Your facial expressions should match what is being shared in the conversation. And as well, make eye contact. Those are some positive non-verbal clues that send a positive message. You want to listen empathetically, without judgment, without being critical. Lose the criticisms. Listening empathetically encourages honesty, feeling secure, and ability to share in a safe environment. Listen empathetically also it demonstrates understanding. And again, empathetic listening, you're listening from a heart, from a place of compassion that you care. You want to also clarify the information that you receive from the person that shared. Clarifying by paraphrasing or repeating back what you heard. You want to repeat it back in your own word. This shows the person that shared with you, hey, they were listening, they got it, they understand. You want to hold your rebuttals. Understand that sometimes you're just there to listen. You're in a position to listen, which leads us to avoiding giving too much information. Sometimes we can bombard people with information, give information overload. The goal is to allow them to arrive at their own solution, their own decision. And when they do this, it is more meaningful and it's more lasting because they weren't persuaded, they weren't told what to do. They arrived at that decision on their own. Also, self-disclosure. And self-disclosure, this is your ability to share, your willingness to be open. There are some risks with it, but it builds trust. It allows you to connect. The risks, the benefits far outweigh the risk. It establishes, again, a connection and trust. And this is a process of inhaling and exhaling because through self-disclosure, you're sending out of yourself. The benefits, again, outweigh the risk. Some benefits would be improved quality of the relationship, deepening a relationship by sharing your reactions, sharing personal information, building confidence. It allows you to validate your perception of the reality. It's a consensual validation. So self-disclosure is good. Again, it builds those connections that we're trying to build. Let's move on to the next slide, please. My implementation plan for these skills that I've acquired. My implementation plan goes back and it covers my overarching goal. I plan to be a level 1 listener, listening empathetically with compassion. My plan is to be more approachable, to be less judgmental. As a listener, I plan to listen from a place of compassion, a place of empathy. To provide a safe place to share, clarify what I heard. When listening, I want to listen without defending, without advising, without agreeing, without disagreeing. And as a talker, I want to share my thoughts and my feelings without accusing, without attacking, without judging, or without labeling. I want to be clear so that the listener doesn't have to fill in the gaps for me. So when applying these skills and communicating, my prayer is that I listen deeply. I listen carefully so that I can understand what is being shared with me. Therefore, I also pray that I will incline my ear to wisdom and apply my heart to understanding and receiving insight. So I thank you for listening.